Okay, guys, how we doing today? Bit of a late upload. I know I said 3 p.m., but it's gonna be an hour late because family came over and had to visit. But so here we go. This is my promised video concerning Jeffrey Epstein. So, from Reason.com, free minds, free markets. Just hold on a second. There we go. Thank you. I know, I drink a lot of soda. Soda and tea. Jeffrey Epstein is dead because his jailers neglected him. He's not the only one. The most unusual thing about Jeffrey Epstein dying in a federal jail was how quickly the Justice Department sprang into action to investigate it. Yeah, you know, kidding, right? The sprawling Bureau of Prisons, or BOP, is one of the most opaque, tight-lipped, and slow-moving agencies in the entire federal government. And yet it sprang into action following the apparent suicide of Jeffrey Epstein, a mysterious billionaire who was arrested in July on accusations of sex trafficking. U.S. Attorney General William Barr said he was appalled by the news that Epstein had died of an apparent suicide in federal lockup in Manhattan. He also announced that the Justice Department had already uncovered serious irregularities at MCC, New York, the jail where Epstein died. The Bureau of Prisons has already resigned the warden of the jail. The new outlets reported that guards who were supposed to be monitoring Epstein were literally sleeping on the job and falsifying jail logs to cover up their lapses. The serious irregularities that the Justice Department suddenly uncovered are everyday occurrences within the BOP, and anyone who's bothered to pay attention to the federal prison system has known about them for years. The real irregularity is that the Justice Department is acknowledging the problem's existence. So they're acknowledging a problem that, in most cases, they probably would not normally acknowledge. Let's continue. USA Today reported last year on critical staff shortages at federal prisons that resulted in nurses and other auxiliary staff being pressed into guard duty. This January, congressional investigators released a report finding that serious misconduct at BOP is largely tolerated or ignored altogether. Cluster FUCK doesn't begin to describe the current state of the BOP, and it dates from beyond Trump administration. David Safavian, deputy director of the American Conservative Union Foundation's Criminal Justice Reform Center, told the Marshall Project this week, anyone who thinks BOP is a high-performing organization has never been inside a federal prison. Part of the problem is that the BOP is its own secretive fiefdom. It's incredibly hard for reporters, family members, and civil liberties groups to find out what goes on behind prison walls, much less hold officials accountable. For example, Reason has been waiting since April for records from BOP regarding the death of several inmates at FCI Aliceville, a federal women's prison in Alabama. The author of the article received a tip from a mother whose incarcerated daughter sent her a message saying women there were dying due to medical neglect. Death by medical neglect. The BOP is definitely not a high-performing organization. Within this government, there's no such thing. The United States government in these sorts of things is grossly incompetent. They have no idea what the hell they're doing. No matter how much we give them in taxation, they always seem to misappropriate the funds in some way or not make proper use of it. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Today, the fourth person died since I've been here. She died in medical around 1 p.m. After sitting in medical complaining of chest pain since 8 a.m., waiting to be seen, my friend from my unit was in medical with her and described the lack of concern shown in this poor woman. Her family, I pray, learns the truth of how she died in the hallway, slumped over in a wheelchair until she fell out onto the floor, dying. Lying there with no more rushing over to assist her, praying for an ambulance that never came. The BOP confirmed the names in 3 of these cases to me, but declined to provide any more information on the causes or circumstances of the deaths. This being the words of the author, not actually me. The family of Rick Turner is waiting for answers too. Turner, a nonviolent drug offender, died in a maximum security penitentiary in June. His family had begged BOP to relocate him, saying he feared for his life in the gang-ridden prison. A member of Congress sent inquiries about his case, all to no avail. The author tried to get records on Turner's death, but BOP rejected his Freedom of Information Act request, citing an ongoing investigation. They rejected a Freedom of Information Act request. Yeah, no, they're definitely not wanting this to get out in any sense. But keep in mind, there's much more information on Epstein's death that sheds a little more light into the situation, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. But I just want to make one thing clear, and that is the gross incompetency of the BOP, as this article makes insanely clear. And for the last year, the author has been trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Michael Monsives, a former federal inmate who says correctional officers at FCI Lompoc, a federal prison complex in California, threw flashbang grenades on him and two other inmates while they were lying prone on the ground. Okay, that's abuse. Monsives, who was doing time for a drug offense, had a good reputation at Lompoc and had convinced the BOP bureaucracy through years of tireless lobbying to let him start an industry-certified vocational wedding program for inmates. On the last night of June 21st, 2017, a large fight broke out between two gangs at the prison. Monsives wasn't anywhere near the fight. He was in a separate housing unit for the residential drug abuse program. The RDAP is the only program through which federal inmates can reduce their sentence, and as such, the lucky ones who are accepted into it aren't looking for trouble. In interviews and written statements, Monsives and other former Lompoc inmates in the RDAP unit said about an hour after the fight started, they were in their dorm getting ready for lights out when they were ordered to stand up by their bunks. They assumed they were about to be counted, but corrections officers yelled at everyone to get on the floor, and seconds later threw flashbangs that landed on top of Monsives and another inmate. Okay, why did they do that? That seems aggressive, inappropriate. That's just straight up abuse. You know, I think it's like what Jordan Peterson says, that you kind of have to imagine yourself as being capable of being an Auschwitz guard. And I think these guys have not only imagined themselves in the role of the abuser, but have deliberately placed themselves in it for some reason. You do not do this kind of thing by accident. This was a deliberate action. So two of these grenades exploded next to my leg and blew the sweats off the left side of my leg, Monsives recalls, and it burned me from my ankle all the way to my upper thigh, all the way down my left arm and parts of my left side. Blew his entire pants off, says Donald Konchuk, another former Lompoc inmate in the unit that night. Burned his leg, shrapnel in his legs, him and a couple of other people that were right there. Monsives' bunk was the closest to the door, which is why he says he was hit. Ramon Daniel, another inmate in the RDAP unit, was assigned to the second closest bunk and says he was struck by two flashbang grenades. One of them landed by my left foot, blew up and broke my left toe, Daniel says. I cannot repair it. Unrepairable, I went to the doctors and they can't do anything about it. The next one fell on my right leg, where it blew up. I had plastic balls in my legs that I removed 2 days later by myself because medical said we don't have any time to give you any attention. So why would they do this exactly? What were they doing that merited this sort of reaction? This seems to me like sort of a severe prison control method, or maybe an overreaction to some perceived infraction. Either way, it's a highly inappropriate measure that resulted in severe injury. And of course, you can't just sue the state over something like this. You were in prison. This is a straight-up violation. Monsives was then thrown in the SHU Special Housing Unit, a sanitized term for solitary confinement, for 71 days. He says he was told he was being investigated for his possible role in the fight, but he and other inmates believe it was a cover-up. What happened, his fellow inmates wrote statements in his defense for all the good that did. When he was finally cleared and let out of the SHU, he had to start the 9-month RDAP program again from scratch, pushing back his release date. Monsives says the grievances he filed were all dismissed, which is typical FOIA record obtained by HuffPost in 2017, show that a minuscule number of inmate complaints against BOP officials are sustained. Other former Lompoc inmates from the RDAP dorm confirmed Monsives' story, but didn't want to give their names as they were still in a halfway house and feared retaliation from BOP. All the former inmates I spoke to said international retaliation is a fact of life in the federal prison system. Michael Monsives, he got done dirty. One former Lompoc inmate says they did him wrong. Yeah, no shit. Monsives and Daniel said prison officials took pictures of their injuries, but BOP has stonewalled attempts to get them. When Monsivais filed a FOIA request for records on the incident, BOP completely withheld 65 out of 67 pages of records. Monsivais gave me a privacy waiver so I could put in a request for his inmate files, but BOP withheld 97 pages in total from me. I don't know if the pictures are hidden away in those pages, and without the photos, Monsivais has been unable to drum up much interest from reporters or civil rights lawyers in his case. In the meantime, he's launching a non-profit, No More Locked Doors, that will place formerly incarcerated people in union trade jobs like welding. But the night of June 21st, 2017 still gnaws at him. I'm a very stubborn and persistent individual, and based on everything I accomplished over there, they should know that, but I guess they're making the bet that I'm going to just go away and get overwhelmed out here with life, he says. What they did to us was wrong, and I believe it's something worth standing up for. To finish this particular article off, people reach out to reporters when the government fails them. I tried, but I haven't been able to prove yet whether Michael Monsivais was a victim of brutality or whether a woman at FCIA, Aliceville, died in a hallway waiting for someone to take her pleas seriously. Or whether Rick Turner, a kind, compassionate man, according to an email I received from a woman who worked with him at a children's hospital, was murdered, just like he said he would be. Meanwhile, Epstein's death, a giant embarrassment for the Justice Department, is being investigated by the Justice Department Inspector General, the FBI, and the House Judiciary Committee. The Justice Department could investigate all these incidents and who knows many hundreds of others that go unreported within our prisons and inform the American people, but apparently you have to be a high-profile, scandalous billionaire to get that kind of attention. Well, this is the kind of language that people use when they're trying to say that they just want to blame it on incompetence, that he did in fact commit suicide. But keep in mind, he wasn't in these kinds of facilities. He was in a suicide watch facility. They can't speak to his example specifically. The people that are against the conspiracy have to speak of other people's examples and say, see, it's just the same. However, what may surprise you is the following. And this is from the NZHerald.co, which borrows this article from The Guardian and Washington Post, sources which I don't necessarily trust that much. But every now and again they find something really good, and this has been authenticated. It says, autopsy finds broken bones in Jeffrey Epstein's neck, deepening questions around his death. The article goes on to say, an autopsy found that financier Jeffrey Epstein sustained multiple breaks in his neck, bones, according to two people familiar with the findings, deepening the mystery about the circumstances around his death. Among the bones broken in Epstein's neck was the hyoid bone, which in men is near the Adam's apple. Such breaks might be self-inflicted, but they are more common in victims of homicide by strangulation. So even the experts are saying he was most likely murdered. Get with the program, folks. This is not just a conspiracy. The details are the first findings to emerge from the autopsy of Epstein, a convicted sex offender and multimillionaire in federal custody on charges of sex trafficking. He died early Saturday morning after guards found him hanging in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, and he could not be revived. Attorney General William Barr, whose department oversees the Bureau of Prisons facility where Epstein died, has described his death as an apparent suicide. Justice officials declined to comment on the new information from Epstein's autopsy. The Office of New York City's Chief Medical Examiner Barbara Sampson completed an autopsy of Epstein's body Sunday, but Sampson listed the cause of his death as pending. Sampson's office did not comment on the injuries found in the autopsy. The details add to the bizarre circumstances surrounding Epstein's death, which have launched a wave of questions and conspiracy theories about how he could have died in federal custody. Even President Donald Trump has egged on speculation without evidence that Epstein, whose alleged victims say they were pushed to have sex with his powerful and celebrity friends, might have been killed to keep him from spilling the secrets of others. Yeah, there was a lot of people involved with his Lolita Express and his weird pedo island, where he probably had that little temple on there that was sort of like a harem for all the teenage girls he kidnapped. The thing is, you can blame it on incompetence. That article is from a trusted source. This one comes from an untrusted source. Trusted by me, that is. But this article I could verify as using actual facts in this case. So I guess WAPO's earned some points from me, though I'm still skeptical of its value as a source. The revelation of Epstein's neck injuries follows reports that officers at the Metropolitan Correctional Center broke protocol and failed to properly monitor him. Corrections officers had not checked on Epstein for several hours before he was found hanging in his cell. A person familiar with the matter said one of a series of missteps in the hours leading up to his death. Veteran prosecutors and law enforcement officials were shocked that one of the most high-profile inmates in the country wasn't more carefully watched, Barr said over the weekend. He was appalled at serious irregulations in jail protocol and later transferred the jail warden to another facility. The thing is, many of the staffers weren't even official staffers. They were supplementary staff that were not fully trained and were only temporary. There was a bunch of temp staffers and temp officers because the project, the DOP, is not properly funded, and he was not being watched consistently throughout the time he was there. However, do keep in mind that many people say that they heard screams and shrieks coming from his cell. And his nearest cellmate was moved out of the cell almost immediately. So very, very suspicious. People familiar with the autopsy who spoke on the condition of anonymity due to the sensitive stage of the investigation said Sampson's office is seeking additional information on Epstein's condition in the hours before his death that could include video evidence of the jail hallways, which may establish whether anyone entered Epstein's cell during the night he died. Results of a toxicology screening to determine if there is any unusual substance in his body, and interviews with guards and inmates who were near his cell. Jonathan Arden, president of the National Association of Medical Examiners, said a hyoid can be broken in many circumstances, but is more commonly associated with homicidal strangulation. Arden, who was not involved in the Epstein autopsy, said that in general a finding of a broken hyoid requires pathologists to conduct more extensive investigation. The age of the deceased was also important, Arden said. The hyoid starts out as 3 small bones with joint-like connections, but hardens during middle age into a U-shape that can break more easily. If hypothetically the hyoid bone is broken, that would generally raise questions about strangulation, but it is not definitive. A handful of studies conducted over the past decade have produced conflicting results about the likelihood of the cause of a hyoid break. One study addressed the discrepancies in academic reviews, saying wide variations in findings of hyoid breaks are possibly due to factors like age of the victim, weight of the victim, type of suspension, and height of suspension. Hyoid fractures have previously sparked controversy in jailhouse and other contentious deaths. In 2008, Ronnie White, a teenager accused of killing a police officer, died of an apparent suicide in a suburban Washington jail cell. But 2 days later, the cause of death was changed to homicide when a Maryland state medical examiner discovered the teen had a broken hyoid. The incident fanned racial tensions and fueled conspiracy theories about the suspect's death in Prince George's County, Maryland. To finish off this article, medical examiners conclude White was probably strangled with a sheet, towel, or crux of the elbow. The officer who moved his body pleaded guilty to obstruction, but no one was ever charged in White's death. A federal judge said in 2013 that it remained a mystery whether the inmate was slain or took his own life. The hyoid bone played a central role in a heated dispute last year over another high-profile death in New York, that of Eric Garner. A New York police officer was accused of using an improper chokehold while trying to arrest Garner and of causing his death. A police officers association claimed that an autopsy from Sampson's office found there was no break of Garner's hyoid bone, and that this proved the officer could not have strangled Garner and caused his death. This demonstrates conclusively that Garner did not die of strangulation on the neck from a chokehold, the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association said. But Sampson rejected that claim, saying she stood by her conclusion that Garner died of compression of neck, or chokehold, compression of chest, and prone positioning during physical restraint by police. Sampson's office said Garner's bronchial asthma, obesity, and high blood pressure were contributing factors. In a widely circulated video of the 2014 incident, the officer was seen grabbing Garner around the neck, pushing him in his face into the pavement. Garner is overheard pleading several times, "I can't breathe." 2 weeks later, Sampson's office concluded the officer's actions were the primary cause of his death. Yes, the cop did kill Eric Garner by applying a chokehold that was inappropriate for a man of his size and of his condition. But as to Jeffrey Epstein, well, based on the current information, i.e., that everything in his cell was meant to be suicide-proof and safe, that the watch was very lax, plus people reported hearing screams and shrieks from his cell, not to mention his cellmate was moved very rapidly, all suggest that arrangements were being made for something to happen. And it's very likely that at some point, someone snuck into his cell, attacked him physically, strangled him to death, and at one point shouted, "Breathe, Epstein, breathe!" to make it sound like it was a suicide, but when it was in fact a homicide. That is the current model of events as I believe they happened. Sometime during when security was more lax. And they were getting it ready step by step so they could go and kill him, to keep him quiet. The Clintons most likely hired someone to kill him. That is what I currently think happened. I'm not saying it's an absolute certainty. But when you got a broken hyoid bone and so many other strange facts surrounding this, strangulation seems so much more likely than a supposed suicide with breakaway paper sheets, which are common practice in suicide cells. Anyway, peace!